Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth of Motor City Madmouth, and we're welcoming a guest co-host, Fernando Vargas. Welcome to the show, Fernando.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Good evening.
And obviously leading off and playing first base, well, maybe not first base, is Damon Knight. How you doing, Damon? He's a contributor for the South Florida Tribune, and Damon's our regular writer, so... it's good to lead off with you. I don't know whether we're going to call you Miguel Cabrera at first base. Well, you're a good first baseman for Knight leading off. Okay, so with that said,
yes,
we'll go from baseball. We're going to talk about pro football, Detroit Lions style. I know the Lions have a situation with Darius Slay that they're not sure whether they're going to keep him going, what kind of a value they're going to get. So why don't you give us some insight statement on Darius Slay, please?
Yeah, so as you just said, Darius Slay's in the last year of his contract. He wants $16 million a year in other years that he's with the Lions. His base salary is $10 million. He averages around $12 million a year. Be in mind, he's gone to 3 straight Pro Bowls. The highest paid corners in the league as of right now are Xavier Howard. He makes $15.1 million. Josh Norman, who just got released after 4 seasons with Washington, makes $15. Tremaine Johnson makes $14.2 million. Xavier Rhodes, $14 million, and the Lions have been discussing possible trades with teams about Darius Slay. They're planning on taking Jeffrey Okudah with the 3rd overall pick to be Slay's counterpart. I think, in my opinion, Slay should be with the Lions. They should give him the money. I think he's worth it. If you add another corner to counterpart with him, he'll be just fine.
Well, the reality of the situation is the Lions don't need another quarterback. I've always been a firm believer that Matthew Stafford is not the problem whatsoever, but what the Lions are thinking to me is anybody's guess. So, I don't know. So, what type of value, Damon, do you think they can get for Darius Slay, if anything?
If anything, I'd say like a second-round pick. I'm not sure he's worth a first. He is up there in age. He's 29 years old. Usually corners start to drop off right around 31, 32. You'll get Richard Sherman. He's not quite what he was. So it'd be smart to get as much as you can for him, like a second-round pick if they do end up trading him. Either way, I think it's a win-win scenario. I wouldn't sign him for a $16 million deal. I think he's worth right around like the 13, 14 range. I'd pay younger players that money. We need to build up cap space for free agents during the offseason in case the draft doesn't work out. Bob Quinn is going into his 5th draft. We haven't found a premium player yet. TJ Hawkinson maybe, but it's going to be a while. We'll just play it safe and see what happens on the road.
Fernando, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so just to push back, you did a small comparison. This is the Lions again. How much body time have these guys used? Is he really is he going one-on-one with top receivers? Is he going one on a great defensive package? So Richard Sherman has played high quality teams and has run deep into the playoff, which adds more time to his body, which gets hit a lot more time than this cornerback you're talking about. So even at the age of 29, he's still pretty young. He's still a lot of legs underneath him. But can he transit? How many defensive coordinators the Lions had in his term there?
I'd say 3 or 4. You look at Jim Caldwell, that's 1. You look at Matt Patricia, that's 2. And then you look at Jim Schwartz, that's 3. So right around 3 or 4, give or take.
So maybe either it's him, he's not coachable, or he's not. They haven't put him in the right defense to excel.
I think it's like an ego thing. I think that in his mind he thinks that I'm good where I'm at. I don't need to get any better. But realistically, he does. I think he could be a much better corner than what he actually is. But like I said, it's all about like who's helping you out. He had Quandre Diggs covering for him. He had Justin Coleman covering for him. And so when you
everybody was a shutdown quarterback against Michael Vick because Michael Vick ran. So so it's kind of interesting to say, I'm a shutdown quarterback. The last cornerback was Revis Island, but he lasted how many years with that big contract?
Yeah.
Not long. I mean, it was with the Jets, and then he bounced back to New England, then went back to the Jets. He won his Super Bowl ring, so his of his goals were already, there. It's just a matter of time, really. You know what I mean? Like, we'll see over time. That's all you can judge a player based on.
Definitely.
And is he worth it? We'll find out.
Scary thought when a guy is 29 years of age and he's getting over there in age. Somehow, some way, Social Security seems like a very big, distant thing with me.
Yes.
And I'm closer than both of you two guys.
But for 29, did he do 4 years in college, or he came out at 2?
I believe he came out 2.
Then he's really older then, because if he came out after 4 years and he has X amount of years, but if he only did 2 years in college, then his mileage is definitely climbing up there on the odometer.
Well, the only thing I can say is in the Detroit Lions realm of what's really going on, okay, he's just simply expensive. That's all.
Yeah. Yes.
Simply
And Jeffrey
expensive.
Okudah, like I said, we're probably going to grab him, or if not trade down. I would pay him that money if he's as great as they say he is. I'd rather pay him X amount of years for this X amount of money instead of just letting him walk just based on who he's playing for. You know what I mean? Like, he's like a Josh Norman playing for Carolina. Now he's with he was with Washington when they were competitive with Cousins. Now that he's released, I think the Lions have a better outcome than Washington did when they had Cousins going forward.
Is it scary to let him walk and to have no backup, or they have a strong depth chart?
There's so many holes that they have that they're in this position or predicament where they have to draft his replacement. But if they draft his replacement, we're still at square one. We haven't gained anything, and we don't know anything about this kid if he's going to translate. I'd rather have a proven player opposite him where he can learn under him. I don't like the idea they were saying, if Stafford gets traded, Jeff Driscoll is, going to be our starter, and then we're going to draft Tua. I don't like that because I don't trust Driscoll to teach Tua much, and I want a proven quarterback to do that for him. That's like Brett Favre with Aaron Rodgers. I want that scenario.
Well, let me just put it to you this way. The Lions know right now Jeff Driscoll must go. Number 2, they need to spend good money on a backup. Because let's face reality, when Matt Stafford went down last year, they never won a football game with David Blau, Jeff Driscoll, or whoever.
Yes.
They couldn't win it with Bozo the Clown, for all I care. The reality is they need a good backup quarterback that they're going to pay a little bit of money for in the event that Stafford goes down. And until they get that situation realized and you understand the value of a backup quarterback, then unfortunately you got issues back home in Detroit.
Has the Lions tagged anybody yet with the what's the
franchise tag?
Have they get that anybody at during the off season?
No, not to my knowledge. As far as I know, everybody that's a free agent, either letting them go or they're trying to figure out how much they're going to pay these players. You look at Graham, their center.
Graham Glasgow. Right.
Graham Glasgow.
Right.
They might let him go. I think that's a terrible idea. The guy's been really consistent. You can say the same thing for Slay as far as health. Even though he's not considered elite, he's pretty good for a guy that stays healthy most of the time. And so that's the only reason why I'd give him that amount of money. But he has to prove it to me. He has to prove that he's worth
to you
$16
personally.
million a year.
Does it prove it to you personally?
Personally?
No, it's just
No.
to the city of Detroit, to the city.
I just seen him get burned too many times to the point where it's you're not elite, man. These guys, just making you look like a first-year corner. I don't know. Receivers are getting so good; it's so hard to tell. I know I couldn't play that position just given my height and athletic ability. So I respect anybody that can do what I can't do, and so we'll see over time.
Well, I think the biggest problem with the Lions, and we all know this, whether it's Cliff Averill, whether it's Kyle Van Noy, you let these guys go away and they end up being thankful that they ended up leaving to go to a different culture. I ran across Bubba Baker here at the Taste of the NFL a few weeks ago at the Super Bowl, and he made me hold a Cleveland Browns helmet, and that was painful because he knew that the culture okay, was so bad in Detroit that as a result, you know, he was glad to get out of there, you know. And I think the realization is when you look at so many different players that have left there and gone on to do different things, and as a result, you know, it speaks for themselves what the culture is. You know, and I don't want to sit here and use this as a beat down section for the Detroit Lions, although most people probably can. But the reality of the situation is there's a reason why they've only won one playoff game in a long time. There just is.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, I heard a story. Cliff Averill, he was at a bar and somebody, you know, he's talking to somebody about, you know, how he was playing in the NFL, and they asked him, like, what team did you play for? And he goes, like, I'd rather not say. And so that's embarrassing within itself. I would be proud to be a Lion. You know, I'm a hometown kid, so I'd be proud to be on their team. But just repetitive years of losing just really gets to you at some point, you know. So
this is Florida. Welcome to the Dolphins territory.
Yeah. Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah.
All right, we got about 2 minutes left.
You guys got the Miami Heat, you know, for basketball.
Not me. I'm a Detroiter, born and raised. So we got about 2 minutes left in the segment here. What do you want to add to Damon real quickly?
No, I think we went back and forth. I think in my head I had a lot of questions, and it's all good to go. It's going to be tough for the upcoming options for Detroit to figure out who they're going to put their franchise tag on, and where they're going to make some decision on the depth chart. And is any coach due to get a contract boost?
Well, let me answer that one for you. Okay, Bob Quinn, the general manager, and Matt Patricia have been given an ultimatum, win or else, so they're going to be gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's where it's at there.
They're on a hot seat.
So to make any stupid decisions through the draft only expedites their exit. Not that it would bother anybody in the metropolitan Detroit area that these two guys better bring this team up to 8-8, 9-7, or they're going to be out the door. Since you got rid of a guy named Jim Caldwell, who left with a couple 9-7 marks and got them to the playoffs, and they had big Super Bowls.
So mistake in their history to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
they should have let him stay.
Well, I mean, again, everybody thought the Patriot way was the way to do it, and obviously, in this particular situation, indeed it was not. So, Damon, all right, I want to thank you for being on the Sports Exchange tonight, and we'll catch you the next time. Thank you, Damon.
Thank you, Scoop. Thank you, Fernando. It was a pleasure, you know, talking to you guys and, you know, talking about sports. It's something I love, so I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Take care.
Yep.
All right, Fernando.
Good night. Yep.
What are your thoughts right now? Obviously, we'll talk about what we're doing with the NFL per se, but when you look at, you know, everybody's talking about the Miami Dolphins being in flux for a while, you know, but I think the Dolphins, a lot of people expected them to go 0-16, and they brought in a former Patriots coach in Brian Flores, who's done a really nice job for them. And act number one, 5-11 for a team that wasn't predicted to do a lot.
It's difficult. Other than California, Florida has to go up against the Jaguars and against the Buccaneers. So it's definitely within your own conference. You got to go in and put some great players in with the colleges and everything. But they got to shake up the house. They already got to shake up the house, find some great teams, put some great players, and draw some schemes to put those players to put in action what they paid them for.
Right. Well, the bottom line is Jacksonville's 5 hours away, Tampa's 4 hours away, and Miami's close by. Now, I must be insane, but I do enjoy the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're 5 hours away. But I have good contacts up there, and I have a good working relationship with the PR staff. But with that said, the state of Florida can handle 3 NFL teams. Just so happens in 1 year, none of them have been any good.
No.
But we're waiting to see one franchise go out there and take hold of the state. But many years ago, the Miami Dolphins back in the 70s were the only team in the state of Florida. Back when they had the undefeated season, the Buccaneers came in 76. The Jaguars came later in the game. With that said, you're a Dolphins guy.
The creamsicle.
Yeah, well, that's true. A lot of people.
But just it's interesting enough. The Dolphins been around since decades, and the undefeated season always comes around. Does the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers, does it feel that old, or are they still relevant?
They've struggled the last few years. I've always been a firm believer that Tony Dungy turned the franchise around, but John Gruden got the ring. But thankfully for Tony Dungy in Indianapolis, he got his ring anyways, and he did it with Peyton Manning. So the reality of the situation is the Buccaneers, outside of a few good years, have not been able to go out there and produce since John Gruden left. I mean, Bruce Arians, I think, will do all right, but we'll have to see whether they can make any sense out of that Jameis Winston situation before anybody can determine where the Buccaneers are going to go from here.
It's interesting.
Well, it always is. It always is, and that's what makes this whole thing, conversational, is how you have so many teams. The one thing you have to understand about the NFL, though, you can go from worst to first very quickly. A couple of good draft choices.
You sure can.
So it's not like a long rebuilding process, whether it's hockey, basketball, and baseball, where it takes years and years. The NFL, 2 or 3, 4 good players, and depending on how you spend your money, since there is a salary cap situation, and all of a sudden you're relevant, and it doesn't take a long time to do it.
You go into practice on a Thursday, and on Saturday you have breaking news that 1 or 2 linemen are out, and there you go. You could potentially get a win against that team on Sunday.
Right. Well, that's true. Again, anything can happen.
One injury away could cause a team to go from a losing record to 500 to a winning record in their first round. And look at the Dolphins. The Dolphins win, really knock out the Patriots bye, and without that bye, did they lose the whole Super Bowl? Was it the bye that caused the championship?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes you wonder after a bye whether a team will become flat or not. I don't know. That
the Patriots are screaming that we needed that time to rest. We needed that time to rest. This is the first time we didn't have a bye.
Everybody's going to complain. 1 minute you're going to need the time to rest. The next minute, we've seen Super Bowls go both ways, Fernando.
Definitely.
Okay? We've seen them go with 1 week's rest because they had to fill it in, or you have 2 weeks. I mean, but either way, you have a winner and you have a loser. Who's going to justify all the amount of preparation you have to do within 1 week, or practice time and so forth?
I can't recall the team, but it was like the last 5 Super Bowls that the team that won it was that won every game on the road. I can't remember which team it was, but to win everything on the road is definitely energy cost.
Well, let's put it this way, okay? The NFL being the league that it is, a 9-7 team can win the Super Bowl. All you have to do is get hot at the right time,
especially from the West Coast.
Well, West Coast, East Coast, if you're hot at the right time.
Oh, no. Some divisions you can't make it with a 9-7.
No, but you can't win a division at 9-7. But you have to understand, okay, getting in as a wild card team, anything can happen. How many times have you seen wild card teams win, even in Major League Baseball?
Oh, well, the Marlins are the only team that's 2-0 in the World Series.
Well, yeah, that's true. They did not win a division title. That's for sure.
They're the only undefeated team in the World Series in Major League Baseball history. The Marlins are 2-0.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, but the reality of the situation, get in, man, and anything can happen.
Oh, definitely. And
think about it this way: the Washington Nationals beat the Milwaukee Brewers last year, and they had to play in, and they ended up going on a hot streak. Well, with that said, okay, we want to welcome Rick Curdy of the Charlotte Bats. And Rick, I want to introduce you to Fernando Vargas, who's our guest co-host for a part of the show. Welcome.
Hey, Fernando.
Hey, how you doing? Welcome.
Good. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So Fernando's trying to give me this business about wild card teams and whether or not they can get in and be effective. Do you have a quick thought there before we go to the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, I mean, wild card, absolutely. I mean, we've seen it in baseball and we've seen it in football. I remember when the Giants, who were a very high underdog, went against the undefeated Patriots and beat them. So, I mean, yeah, wild cards are effective. And even if you have like a big payroll, that doesn't mean anything. You see a lot of small market teams win. So, yeah, absolutely.
But majority of the wild cards come from tough divisions, I think. Right. The Giants are from the East, which are quote unquote powerhouse teams, so they could have afford to go to the next round as a wild card. But if it's a wild card team like the Central, I don't think they have a strong to win out.
Yeah, it would have to be like a process of elimination. It would have to be a lot of teams losing, a lot of teams winning, and the cards will have to fall in the right place for that to happen. I agree.
Okay, with that said, we're going to talk about the XFL week number 2, and we're taking your act to the Pacific Northwest, that team called the Seattle Dragons. put in
Yep.
over 25,000. So, Rick, this is your portion of the program that you're going to educate Fernando a little bit about the XFL.
Awesome. Well, we had another exciting day in the XFL. Seattle had their home opener. They're called the Seattle Dragons. They play at CenturyLink Field where the Seahawks play, and they had about 25,000 there. Jim Zorn, the old Seattle quarterback for the Seahawks, was there. He's the head coach, actually. They actually have a part where they light the cauldron, and the great Steve Largent, Hall of Fame player, actually lit the cauldron, and it was exciting. The game was loud. It was so loud there that they had the other players couldn't even hear their plays in their helmets because it was such a great ovation that the fans do. And Seattle is just a great sports city. I mean, it really is. When I heard the XFL were going to Seattle, I thought, well, they already have a team. They have the Seahawks. I don't know if they can support two. No, they could support two very, very easily. So it was a great game. The Dragons looked pretty good. They faced the Vipers, who unfortunately are probably the Bengals of the XFL. They're not very good. So, but they're not very good at all.
You're a tough cookie to crack, huh?
Well, Rick Curdy has a reputation in these parts that he's definitely one of the toughest ones. Damon Knight is one of those kind of guys who, is very conservative but very knowledgeable and does a good job contributing. Rick Curdy's been given the freedom to say whatever the heck he wants, and he's lucky. The one thing about Rick Curdy, though, he's just lucky that this is not an FCC thing here, and you know about FCC because you went to broadcasting school, didn't you, Fernando?
Yeah. A little bit of that, but yeah. So you think the Seattle FC is better than the XFL? The fan base, but Seattle has a huge, great following.
They do. They really, really do. I know they support their soccer team well, and they're going to get a hockey team. The NHL is going to be expanding to Seattle very, very soon, and it's about time. I've been always wondering why Seattle doesn't have a professional hockey team, and so I'm glad that the NHL is finally expanding to Seattle. So now the only thing that's next is the Supersonics, and I believe they'll be coming back. I don't know when, but I've heard the commissioner of basketball talk about expansion, and he said Seattle's on top of that list. And I think the way they left, I think when the owner bought the Sonics, said he wasn't going to move them, and then shortly after that, he moved them to Oklahoma City. So I think that kind of left a bad taste in people's mouths. And people want to see Seattle. I love to see the Supersonics back. I miss the good old days of the Sonics and George Carr. I remember that. They were a great team. So I'm happy for Seattle that they have two football teams and they're getting a hockey team.
Seattle, bear in mind, okay, the only reason they lost the Sonics is because they didn't have a suitable facility for them. You and I talked about it during pre-production that the Key Arena was not a very good arena than the Tacoma Dome. So now that they're starting to invest money into that arena, and the NBA is taking notice of it, and therefore it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and at least they were able to keep the Supersonics. But I'm glad hockey's going there first because a lot of people don't realize that many, many years ago that the Seattle Metropolitans were the first team that ever won the Stanley Cup, believe it or not, back in the early 1900s. So that's a little trivia that Fernando...
Scott the historian over here.
Yeah, well, I've been around it for a while. I had the gray hair to show it. But
you probably have a press pass from that day.
Well, yeah, I think my Papa Morris, long live my Papa Morris and all the other grandfathers that preceded him or before or after. But no, the Seattle Metropolitans were the first team to win a Stanley Cup. And then obviously now they're going to be welcomed back to the league, but not in the Metropolitans, only because they have a division called the Metropolitans. But I'll be curious to see what they come up with a nickname. But yeah, there's no question that Seattle is definitely a four major sports town. And if you count soccer, which I personally care less about, maybe you can call it five. But that's for one's subjective point of view. Seattle to me is known as, they should name the team called Seattle Starbucks.
Or the Seattle Schultz, the Seattle Howard Schultz.
There's a name of the past because he used to be the former owner of the Sonics before he sold a team. And it was sad. I remember too, Rick. You had Sean Kemp and you had Gary Payton, and the history. Yeah. In fact, I'll go back to Marvin Webster and Jack Sikma. Downtown Freddie Brown and those times when they went ahead.
Nate McMillan.
Nate
McMillan. I remember Detlef Schrempf.
Well, again, they had a really good history. So We don't want to make sure we lose Fernando here with all this Seattle history stuff.
No, the only Seattle history is I went to school with HB Blades. That's the only Seattle history that I have.
HB Blades, really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, we went to the same high school together. We were, Plantation High School was ranked number 1 in the state. Well, at the time, ranked number 2 behind Miami Central. And to get in to win the division, to go number 1, HB Blades ran through the middle and blocked the field goal. And we won by 1. He chose not to go to UM. He wanted to start his own path and play for Weinstead up there in Pittsburgh. And I never knew of this HB, until to the senior year. But that's the only Seattle history that I have is with his father playing for the Seahawks.
So let's talk about the attendance figures for the opener with the Dragons. 25,000, good first act out there.
Yes, it's doing great. They had the Wildcats played. They were close to 15,000. So far, they've been averaging about 16,000 a game. And the St. Louis will be playing this week, and they're sold out. So a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of people like it. The games are so much shorter. They're 3 hours long. Sometimes they're 2 hours and 45 minutes long. And it's just a lot of that dead air, that dead time, that just standing around, that's all gone. And it's just a much quicker, and it's a much better game. I enjoy it a lot.
Well, no, and obviously, the conditions were rainy and wet on Sunday.
Yes, it was a little slippery out there. We had some people fall, but the great Seattle crowd. It doesn't matter if it's they're like the mailman. Whether it rains, sleet, or snow, they're going to be there, and that's how the Seattle fans are. They're very, very passionate, and Seattle is a terrific sports city. Right,
and of course the fact that they're very loud. I remember, and the play calling makes it difficult for a lot of teams to concentrate. I got to tell you, many years ago, I had an opportunity to cover a Seahawks game at the old Seattle Kingdome, and I'm going to tell you right now, that is a very, very loud place, that's for sure. So nobody will ever downplay the passion that those Seattle fans have. So, it'll be interesting to see how things go up there in Seattle, but I know that Seattle is definitely a heck of a sports town, and, they get behind the Mariners out there. We all know that they're a rabid Seahawks town, and of course, don't forget the University of Washington out there in Seattle as well. The Huskies, they go out there and draw pretty well as well. So, anything else you want to add about the XFL, Rick?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me on the show. It's nice meeting you, Fernando. And you got to tune into the XFL and watch some new, innovative football, and not some, it's an exciting product, and it's spreading a lot of buzz. And even Jim Rome just trashed it, which is kind of a compliment because he don't like anything. So it's a very exciting times for professional football.
Well, Fernando has one more thing he wants to ask you. Go ahead, Fernando.
Sure.
It's very premature, but could the XFL be the D League and then the 3-on-3, the Big Three?
It could be. The NFL is looking at it with a lot of interest. They're already thinking about getting some plays. They have the kickoff return is interesting, where the players don't move till the guy catches the ball. And they're looking into something like that, and that's a possibility. I mean, it could be some type of maybe AAA football for the NFL or something.
There are a lot of players who are missing out because they don't get picked up, and they could go and play and weather the storm, and with XFL.
Yeah, and that's true. There's so many. I mean, they cut so many players there because it's so hard to get into the NFL. That I heard the average career is 3.5 years in the NFL, which is really short. And so a lot of them they're such great players, but the talent pool is so high there. So the XFL is a good alternative for them to go there, or the CFL. But that's the great thing about the XFL. You see players get second chances, like this PJ Walker guy who was with the Colts. And this guy's like the superstar of the XFL right now for the Houston Roughnecks. So it's always great to see other players get second chances.
Well, and one that stands out in my mind right before we end the segment is Cardale Jones is doing a really nice job over with the DC Defenders. So, and here's a guy that led Ohio State to a national championship, and now he's 2-0 in the pros. And Cardale Jones, I think, will be the first guy who gets an opportunity back in the NFL.
Quarterback, right?
Yeah, quarterback, yeah. So I definitely see his name being called after this year. But it would be incredible if Cardale Jones could win a championship for DC Defenders, win it with Ohio State. Then you got to wonder, with all these quarterbacks that would be drafted in the NFL, that you might have a couple of good ones sitting here as well. So, you have a lot of interesting dynamics.
Sounds like the next Kurt Warner.
Well, you know what, though? That's a good example, though, Fernando. It really is.
Minus the shopping cart.
Yeah, well, do you
the
know
supermarket.
But do you know where he played? The Iowa.
The CFL, right?
No, I played the arena football.
The arena,
the Iowa
correct.
Barnstormers, man. I'm going to teach you what a barnstormer is. We barnstorm you every Tuesday night.
I was half right. But yeah, but definitely great.
CFL as well. So
that was the confusion. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Hey, this is his first rodeo here, but he's doing okay. He's passing his first test. What do you think, Rick?
Oh, he's doing a great job, man.
Well, we're here at the studio. No cell phones, no computer. There's no Google to cheat my stats, so I'm pulling out of memory right now. So please forgive me.
Well, you got to remember what Rick has to deal with on Thursday night. We have the stat clown and the sarcasm clown. So
yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, that's a match made.
Like Wilder and Fury on Thursdays. It's great.
Oh yeah, isn't that the truth? All right. Well, meanwhile, Rick, thanks again for being on the Sports Exchange, and have yourself a great night. Well done, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Fernando. I appreciate it.
Take care.
So, Fernando, you've been in here for a little while. What are your thoughts? Having a good time?
I am speechless. The conversations that you and I had was pretty awesome. But the contributors are calling in, and they're spot on with their information.
Yeah.
They're spot on. So those listeners out there, definitely call in, text in, tweet in. There's some definitely stats coming out.
Yeah, well, again, one thing we try to do is we try to keep it real. We really do. And, as you get to know the process as time goes on, you'll understand the dynamics of how it is. Today you get the abbreviated version. The next time you're in town, you get the extended version.
Oh, definitely. You got to make sure you don't go on vacation because you as the historian, you got to fact check us.
Let's put it this way. I'm 57 years old. And how old are you?
35 in 5 days.
Okay, well, an early happy birthday for you, by the way. But I'm 57, so that makes me 22 years older. I don't want to do the math on the calculator in terms of hours and days and all that business.
1,000 seasons worth.
Yeah, something like that. But all I know is there's a little bit of history there that goes beyond Wikipedia, that's for sure.
Definitely.
I'm going to tell you, back in the day when I was covering everything, that we used to have press releases.
Feathers and ink?
What's that?
Feathers and ink?
Yeah, feathers and ink, typewriters and whiteouts. Forget that thing called a computer. Technology, it really is unbelievable stuff. So,
were you reporting before recorders, or you had recorders back?
I had tape recorders back then. I wonder where all my interviews went. Although I did save a lot of them, they're probably at home in the closet. Some of the real good ones that I have.
Or in the Smithsonian.
No, now the question is whether or not I have a tape recorder that'll play them, whether I can put them on digital. But one day, I'll tell you some of my favorite interviews when I have a little bit more time. So, the main thing is, it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. Do appreciate the time.
Guest on the show here tonight, and we look forward to, hopefully, our goal is to have you provide more content for the South Florida Tribune as well. So, what we can do right now is, why don't you let everybody know where you currently work when you're not here on the air?
Well, yes. So from 9 to 5, I work for United Water Restoration. We're one of the largest independent corporate restoration company of fire, water, mode. We have 15 locations in the state of Florida, and we also have 17 locations outside. So if you have any questions, call 1-8444-WATER DAMAGE.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We appreciate you being on the program, and we look forward to the next time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, meanwhile, our next guest is going to be Bill Winters, who should be calling in any time right now. Candy, what are your observations right now about what we've accomplished up to this point?
I think you've done a good job. I think it's been fun. I think, Fernando, you've had a good time?
I sure have.
Hey, that's what it's all about, That's what we're doing, is bringing, talking sports and having fun. That's what it's all about.
All right, well, with that said, okay, we have a pretty good lineup going on here later on during our second hour. But right now it's always great to be able to introduce other people to the program. So, we welcome Bill Winters in a moment. Anything you want to add right now about what people have to look for with the South Florida Tribune?
Check us out, www.southfloridatribune.com. We have a Facebook page, YouTube page, Twitter page, Instagram page. All of it we're covered. Check us out on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, CastBox, wherever you get your podcasts. Deezer, Podcast Addict, Spotify. Like us, subscribe to us, all of the above.
There you go, and you're hearing it from Candy Abling. She's a web designer for the company as well. So again, Fernando, it's been a pleasure having you on the program, and again, we look forward to hopefully more opportunities to do this as well.
Definitely South Florida. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Good job. Got his first lesson of the XFL tonight, and Rick Curdy was more than happy to deliver it for him.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
So anyways, meanwhile, just so we have to look forward to later on in our second hour, we're looking to bring on Jason Prock, David Levin, and hopefully Jake Rogel will be able to come on the program as well. So, we've had a pretty good, busy weekend in sports here locally. We had Nova Southeastern University. Candy and I were able to go out there and cover that. Nova Southeastern lost to Florida Southern 102-96. And, Nova Southeastern, we had a great time talking about Coach Jim Crutchfield. Jim was one of the finer coaches in Division II, and he entered this season with an .844 winning percentage. So, we have a lot of things that we're looking forward to doing. We want to thank a lot of our media distribution partners as well. Florida Atlantic University is one of them, Lynn University, University of South Florida, my alma mater. We always like to have the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Daytona International Speedway for providing us with a lot of good content. To follow us here, look for us at Tribune South, and you can also like us on Facebook. So look for South Florida Tribune on Facebook as well. So far, a very good show. Damon Knight is a regular contributor to the broadcast. Rick Curdy tends to bring on a lot of his beautiful, unbelievable sarcasm to the show. And we look forward to having Bill Winters. We have a lot of other shows on the network that we like to talk about. The South Florida Tribune podcast will be coming on more often. We have the Real and the Real Wild Bill Winters has his own show, Motorman and Wild Bill Winters, to go along with a lot of other programs as well. So, meanwhile, we look forward to having Bill on the program just a moment from now. As we go ahead and look at some of the sports that we have going on looking ahead, South Florida Tribune will have live coverage of the 12 hours of Sebring, and that race weekend will occur during the third week of March. I believe it's March 18th through the 21st, and I'm looking forward to bringing Ken Breslauer on the show as well. So, this will be our second opportunity to cover the event, and I look forward to it. Last year when I did endurance racing, it was my first rodeo doing it. Now I feel like I'll be a bit more comfortable doing it, and I can tell you right now, for those of you that don't understand a whole lot about endurance racing, the 12 hours of Sebring is quite an event, right, Candy? We had an opportunity to cover that event, and it was a good opportunity for us to do that.
Yeah, 12 hours Sebring is good. It was fun. Endurance racing. I've never witnessed it. Last year was my first experience with it. To be doing how many hours of 12 hours? I can't imagine the 24 hours of Daytona, much less the 12 hours.
Yeah, it's... Well, as we talk about Sebring, we get to talk about our final guest of the night, former New York Giants offensive lineman Bill Winters. So, Bill, welcome back to the Sports Exchange.
Hey, Scott, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Well, Bill, we have some, things you want to talk about. I talk about the XFL, so lead off and fire away.
All right, well, it's pretty easy to see after 2 weeks that the two best teams in the league are the Washington Defenders in the Eastern Division and the Houston Roughnecks in the Western Division. Both have the best two quarterbacks in Cordell Jones with the Defenders and P.J. Walker from with the Houston Roughnecks. So I expect those two teams to play in the championship game in Houston on April 26th.
Yeah, Cardell Jones has definitely gone ahead and found himself a new life in this league, hasn't he, Bill?
Yes, he has. It's the same thing with P.J. Walker. In fact, Walker's playing lights out. He's fun to watch. It reminds me of Fran Tarkenton running around back there. He can make plays with his arm as well. So, they run the run and shoot there. So, until teams figure it out, I like the Roughnecks to win the championship.
What are your thoughts about the play of? What are your thoughts about the way Landry Jones played over the weekend? I know it's his first game back.
He played horrible.
Yeah.
I wasn't impressed at all. But he hung in there, and they won. They pulled the game out, and I think he's going to get better and everything. But I don't think he's anything great. I don't think he's in any great shape. Can't run very well. He's a pocket passer, and I just think that in this league you need a guy that can make plays with his legs as well, because of the lack of cohesiveness with the offensive line.
So how do you think?
A short amount of time they've had.
How do you think Bob Stoops is acclimated to the pro game? Obviously it's not the NFL, but the XFL, you're still dealing with men and not kids.
Too early to tell. I think the first game they didn't have Landry Jones. Landry Jones is his man because he had him in Oklahoma, so he knows what he can do. So I would say the jury's still out on Stoops on how well he adjusts to the pro game. But 10 games, it's going to be tough to judge. It may take a season or two before we figure out how well he is as a pro coach.
I haven't heard a lot about the ratings in week 2 so far, Bill. Have you heard much about the ratings and your thoughts about the attendance in week 2?
Oh, the attendance improved. Seattle had 30,000. St. Louis this weekend is going to have over 30,000. So the metrics are still as good as the first week and probably getting better. And then, of course, it'll level off because people were looking at the first week, just out of curiosity. But I think it's taken hold, and the ratings will continue to stay fairly solid. Maybe a little bit of a drop-off, but enough to keep all the networks happy. And, of course, Vince McMahon happy. Because they were looking to average around 17,000 fans, and they'll do more than that during the course of the season.
Yeah, I think you brought up an interesting point with the St. Louis Battlehawks. They're playing in the dome that the Rams left. But yet, you know what? Even though the NFL has departed there twice, somebody was asking me about who was at fault the first time when the Cardinals left. I think the city of St. Louis was at fault because they let him go. Where obviously Stan Kroenke left, and as a result, he knew he was going to L.A., and he certainly made a great move for himself. But I'm still glad to some extent, though, that St. Louis gets another shot at a pro team, even if it is just 10 weeks, because I still think St. Louis is a really good sports town.
Oh, yes, it is. In fact, the Battlehawks played the Roughnecks, and quite frankly, they came back in the second half after being down by over 2 touchdowns, with the extra points, with the 3-2-1 format, they were able to get back in the game. And what's really interesting is they had them on the ropes going down to go for the go-ahead touchdown, the Battlehawks were. And this is the instant replay. The officials blew the call. The guy actually crossed the line of scrimmage, and, of course, Tamu, the quarterback, who I like a lot, I think he's right behind Walker and Jones because he can run and make plays with his legs as well and is young and is only going to get better. But he thought he got a free play because the linebacker crossed the line of scrimmage. So he just threw the ball up and he threw a pick. He was really upset about that. So, the Battlehawks are right there as well. And they could, maybe take the defenders or the Roughnecks out if they play each other again, but I doubt it. But, St. Louis is a heck of a sports town, and they're probably going to be one of the best draws in the league.
Okay, well, a couple more things we'll talk about, then we'll talk about your show tomorrow. Okay, well, what are your thoughts about Drew Brees?
Well, he's going to be back for another year, which means the Saints got to make a decision about Bridgewater and also Hill. I think if I was Teddy, I would sit back and go, okay, I'm going to go ahead and see what's out there. but I may just come back to the Saints. But it depends on what kind of offers he gets. Somebody may step up and say, "We want you to be our starting quarterback," and then it's all over with. And then the Hill's in the same boat. But when you've got all those cards in your deck, the Saints are dealing with from a position of strength, and they may lose one of those guys, but they'll keep the ship going because I think Brees still has a year or two left in him, without a doubt.
Okay, and let's talk about Joe Burrow.
Everybody's talking about Joe Burrow, with his comment today about, if they select me, they select me. And, the Palmer kid is Jordan Palmer, which is Carson Palmer's brother, is his trainer. All right, and Carson Palmer wanted to be out of Cincinnati after 15 years and retired. And, the Brown family said, "Oh, you signed a contract. We're not going to let you go anywhere." So it's probably going to be, and then they wound up a year later shipping him to the Raiders. So I think the same situation happens here. I don't think the Bengals are going to be threatened by him maybe saying that, I want to go somewhere else by some kind of blasé comment that he made, if like what he said. If they select me, they select me, which doesn't mean, makes it sound like he's kind of wishy-washy about going there, and then he's drinking the Palmer Kool-Aid. And then, Steve Bartkowski stepped up and said, "You need to do an Eli Manning." You need to just say, "I don't want to be here," and, get a trade and all that. Along the lines of what Elway did also with Baltimore. But I don't think it's going to come to that. I think that he'll wind up signing with the Bengals. But I would sign a short-term deal, and get my reps and be a starting quarterback for maybe a team that's not ever committed to winning a Super Bowl, because that's the rub on the Bengals. That's why Burrow wants out. And then he can always go somewhere else. But if you're a rookie and you're a first-round draft choice, I think the best thing to do is just go ahead and go to the Bengals, and I think that's what Burrow will wind up doing. So a lot of this is just posturing, but you never know. But if I was a betting man, which I am, I'm going to say he goes to the Bengals and stays there.
Well, I like your fighting spirit. I'm a betting man, and you are. At least you're not afraid to admit it on the air. That's okay. That's what I love about you, Bill.
Well, can I be honest with those XFL games are the biggest thing up in Vegas.
Oh, really?
There's more money bet on those games than there were in the NBA. They're beating the ratings in the NBA. Of course, that'll all change during the playoffs. But, that's another reason why the XFL is going to be successful. And then they're going to have a fantasy app in a couple of weeks once the season's halfway through and they know who's on the rosters. And that's going to inject capital, because there's 30 million people out there that are looking for a fix for fantasy, and the XFL will give that to them. And then it'll just get stronger and stronger and stronger over the years.
All right, well, we'll get you out of here on this note. Then you can promote your YouTube channel, okay? I know in the past when we've talked about posturing, Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers was the first opportunity for anybody to classify anything as posturing, okay? And you see how that worked out. Eli goes to the Giants, and Phillip Rivers goes to the San Diego Chargers. And, of course, I remember when John Elway forced his hand by utilizing baseball as an option to force his way out of Baltimore, and he ends up with Denver. So I don't know how much you really view this as posturing.
Well, that's exactly what it is. Both sides have leverage, but I don't think Burrow is in a situation right now. He's going to hire boys from Athens. If I'm him, I'm going to go to the Bengals, because I know the Bengals are going to play hardball. If he turns around, they draft him, and he goes, I don't want to play for it and everything, they're just going to sit back and do nothing. And then, next year he's in the mix again with Trevor Lawrence, and that's not good for him. So when I think through this thing, I think it's just posturing, but in the end, he'll sign with the Bengals.
All right,
so
Bill.
It's not going to be an Elway, or it's not going to be Eli Manning deal. It might look like it, but I don't think it'll happen.
All right, Bill, we'll give you about a couple of minutes to promote your YouTube channel, whatever, so the floor is yours.
Okay, folks, just go to YouTube, type in my name, Bill Winters, put the word football after it. A purple circle will come up with me wearing a Nike hat. Click on it, you're subscribed. All right, so we'd appreciate that. You can also find me on Facebook and also Wikipedia. Just Google Bill Winters Football. My body of work will come right up. And also I have a website, billwinters.biz. There's a gallery of pictures in there because I'm one of the few players that have played and started in 3 different leagues for 3 legendary coaches at 3 different positions. So you get real familiar with my body of work, and also touts my book that I wrote in 1985. So you guys, it's a good little read. So we get the full Monty there. You get a YouTube channel, you get a Wikipedia page, and we also have a periodical for you to read that I think you get enjoyment out of. And then, of course, we always have the South Florida Tribune, and you can find our shows on Spotify, Apple, and iHeart. Just Google Motormouth, and that's 2 words, Motormouth and Wild Bill Winters. I had someone yesterday that subscribed to the South Florida Tribune, and she was typing it in there and wrote Motormouth as 1 word, and it came right up after we typed in 2 words. So that's just a little coaching point for our audience out there.
Bill Winters, I've trained you well, brother.
Oh, yeah.
Don't worry, we have a lot of things ahead of us, Bill. Good stuff.
You know me. I'm looking forward to getting Barstool Sports in the ring and spanking them silly. I'm listening to those boys. I don't think they're as good as we are. So we'll just wait for our opportunity, and there's enough business out there for everyone. But, Scott, between you and me, we can give our audience the higher-ended stuff and be right most of the time. And that's why our audience will like us. Well,
you know what, Bill? Like I said, I have a lot of shows on this network, and I enjoy every one of them because they're my own children. But I got to tell you, I do definitely take on a special passion for what we do, the 2 and I. I've always said to a lot of people out there that, you know what, if I were a play-by-play guy, you would be my color commentator. And you know what, that would be the biggest no-brainer on the planet, Bill. I'll mean that to the last, until the day I no longer can talk. And if I do, I'll have somebody engrave it someplace else. So it's better.
Scott, I got to tell you this. This is kind of funny. I'm actually going to post this on my Facebook page this Thursday.
Okay.
I had an agent and manager when I was working as an actor out in California, Kathy Carter, who is a beast.
Yeah.
And she came up to me and said, "I'm going to make you a star." And I looked at her like this, and I had an agent who discovered, Kevin Costner, before Kevin left Tyler and Tyler Carr and went out to a much bigger agency. So she says, "I want you to meet Babette Perry, who was Rodney Perry's wife, who ran NBC Studios." This is when the XFL was coming out.
Right.
So I went in there for a meet and greet, and I was supposed to meet her for 5 minutes. I was in there for about an hour. The next thing you know, Kathy Carter, my manager/agent, and I are being flown in by Vince McMahon to audition for the XFL to broadcast the games. As we're flying down there, my gut instinct's telling me that this XFL is going to roll over on its face because you can't do cheesecake stuff for cheerleaders and doing TNA stuff. Going into the locker room, all right, which is a sanctity, all right, and then also combining wrestling with and gimmicks in pro football. I said, if they just do it the right way, like they're doing now, it'll fly. So here it is, 20 years later, and I went in the booth with Mike Adamle, and I can remember walking in the studio, and there was John Jefferson, Tony Saragusa, a bunch of guys that had broadcasted volleyball games that actually wound up getting the auditions. Mike and I went in there, and the rumor was that we did the best job. And I can remember the producers wanted to do the wrestling gimmick. So I was sitting there with Mike, and Mike's doing the play-by-play, and I'm doing the color commentary, and we're broadcasting the second half of the St. Louis Rams Titans game where Eddie George gets stopped, or not, I think it was Eddie George, or the receiver gets stopped a couple inches from the goal line, so the Rams win. And I'm kind of doing the color commentary. And the producer's sitting there going, "Give me more, give me more, give me more." And I was calling Adamle a pissant, and he's doing the wrestling gimmick while I'm broadcasting the game. And Kathy told me when we finished, she was watching it, that they went nuts up there. They said, "Bill, you did the best audition. You got this part." And I'm going, "No, I didn't, because I'm not a household name." And that's what I love about where we're at right now, Scott. I have been in the room. I'm a lineman, so we don't get the recognition. But I know a lot more than a lot of the people out there doing this for a living because they have names, but they sat on the bench. Okay, I'm sitting here. I'm a 60-minute man. Still Bill was my nickname. I'm in there all the time. So, as a lineman, it's tough to get some publicity. So now we have a great equalizer called the podcast.
Right.
Where people will eventually pick up on this stuff and will go to the top of the class. And I'm looking forward to getting in the rooms with guys like J.J. Watt and all this stuff because we will die laughing. Because we're all cut out of the same cloth. We just come from different avenues. And I come from the road most traveled. Okay? And that, it's a motivation for us. And only in America can a guy get an opportunity maybe to play professional baseball like I did back in this, senior professional baseball league, and also possibly get an opportunity to podcast and blow up nationally and have some fun. And I think we'll take our audience with us. And I have a couple of people now that have been listening to our show, and they love it. Yeah. And they continue to listen to it. They just keep coming up to me going, keep it up, man. I really liked it. So that's nice, and they're a tough audience. So I know we're on the right track, Scotty boy. I know we are. And I'm sure Don King will be more than happy to go ahead and charge you for the Only in America as well. So, but that, because Don King would have loved me. Oh, Don, no question he'd love you. Thank God a lot of what we do, though, isn't FCC regulated for what you do. Otherwise, I'd have probably been fined Jed Clampett money. But the one thing I love about you, Bill, and there are a lot of things I do, is the fact that I'm letting you go ahead and run amok, as they say out in this business. So, you know what? You're right. We're going to have a whale of a time for sure. So, meanwhile, folks, that concludes tonight's edition of the Sports Exchange. Wild Bill Winters and I will be on tomorrow night. So, meanwhile, Bill, thanks for being on the program, and we would thank everybody for joining the Sports Exchange tonight. Good night, everybody, from Scott Morganroth and Wild Bill Winters. Good night, everybody. Good night.